I think the British Army that inhabited the American colonies in 17th, they had more soldiers here in the colonies at the time than they do in the current army right now. Think about that. All the United States can do is just ignore the UK, and then at that point, what's the UK going to do? They're like a nasty little dog with no teeth. Loud, yeah, but they don't have troops. You got a few nukes, but hell, their navy can't even get out of its ports. The UK is a joke anymore. It's an absolute joke. And they're playing dress up, pretending to be the great military power. They're not. And they really, frankly, haven't been a great military power. That ended with World War I. They burnt themselves out there, survived World War II because of the United States and the Soviets. But now, having to face reality. This is really another example of this woke mentality. They're the ones that try to reduce competition in sports so that there were no losers. Everybody's a winner, get a participation trophy. Yeah, Europe's getting a participation trophy, but they're getting beat. And they've let the United States basically humiliate them too. So yeah, this world order governed by the G, it's increasingly irrelevant. The signs are that the next decade, the next 20 years, the countries that are going to play the dominant role, China, Russia, India, the United States. They're the big countries or the big economies. Europe's fading. They're really a second-rate region. This has been more about a colonial U.S., let's call it neo-colonial empire initiative. And going forward, Europe needs to pull its own weight. And if they're going to sanction, Trump said, if you're going to put tariffs on goods that we send to you, we're going to put tariffs on goods you send us. And if you don't put tariffs on us, we're not going to put tariffs on you. It would be equal. But I really think this week marked the start of the end of NATO. It became very clear when Hegseth said, hey, if you send French, German, British troops to Ukraine to help secure the peace, you're not doing it under NATO auspices. You don't get to claim if you get shot and killed and attacked that it's an Article 5. And, hey, we ain't playing that. You're on your own. And, if Ukraine wants some more weapons, you provide it, not us. We've done our bit. We're done. And that was the message. That was genuinely shocking. Europeans bet a lot of money, and particularly the Brits. They were hoping that basically some of this money was like seen as a loan to Ukraine, and that they were going to secure rights to critical minerals assets in Ukraine. That's not going to happen now. Whatever they hoped to take from Ukraine economically is disappearing. The Russians are going to control the critical resource-rich regions. But the reality is there is no majority consensus. That's part of the problem. Europe's lost. And what they've come up against is here in the United States, at least, we've had a majority consensus. They're tired of this whole woke mentality. They're tired of being told that white men are bad, that you're evil. And there's been that pushback with Trump. The key thing, I think, for Europe is there's no majority viewpoint. You can't point to one party that represents 51, 52, 60% of the people. They're all at 24%. They talk about, oh man, AfD, boy, they're coming on strong. They got 27% of the support. And that's considered significant. Well, maybe it is. Now, the folks on even whatever you want to call that, the left, the woke crowd, the globalists, they don't like it and they're pushing back. And they certainly don't like it in Europe. But I think Trump and Vance are now basically saying, we don't care. We think you're wrong. And Europe is reeling from that. They're shocked. Europe has very small armies. Combined, they would be still only about the 1/3 the size of Russia's army if you put them all together. They don't have any intact industrial production lines producing tanks, armored vehicles, artillery shells, combat aircraft. In fact, what the United States wants Europe to do is buy that from the United States, which the United States is making at a pretty slow pace. Right now, we can produce 550 Patriot missiles a year. 6 of those for every incoming missile from Russia that they're fired at, you're going to use at least two Patriot missiles going after it. Just do the math. You got 550 will last you a month. But then, in fact, that's the United States can only produce that for a year. So, yeah, it's a legitimate criticism of Europe. I think the one message Europe probably got out of this week's exchange with Secretary of Defense Hegseth and then J.D. Vance and probably Marco Rubio is, we're not best friends anymore. Or we're going to start seeing other people. That's been in this relationship, and you show up and the girlfriend telling ugly fat Europe, we're going out with some more attractive people than you. Why is Germany deindustrializing? Would it have anything to do with the fact that the United States blew up the Nord Stream pipeline and cut off Germany from cheap sources of natural gas and was intent on preventing Germany from buying gas and oil from Russia at relatively cheap prices, which would allow its industry to be competitive? The United States needs to take responsibility for helping create this mess. Yeah, he's absolutely right. It's not just Europe that's deindustrializing. Look in the goddamn mirror. The United States is not some industrial powerhouse. We are dependent. We've offshored much of our industry. Now, Trump wants to change that. At least he says he wants to bring it back home. But the United States is long, long ways from what it was 50 years ago, as far as an industrial base. They're talking about a strength that doesn't exist. So they're not in a position to do it. They can't change they can't change the war on the ground. They can't change the trajectory that this thing's going. They're delusional. Europe right now is in a state of shock based upon what they've heard from both Trump, Pete Hegseth, and now J.D. Vance. They're in absolute shock. And again, I'll put it in terms of personal relationships. Imagine that you're dating a girl and the fiance, you got marriage planned, the marriage is scheduled and everything. And all of a sudden, she shows up and says, wedding's off, I'm not marrying you. It's been nice knowing you. It's that kind of shock that's going on here with Europe. They've just been blindsided. But if they in any way try to block, the Baltic states they're going to try to block the Russians from exiting, well, the Russians will blow them out of the water. Then what are they going to do? Russia is going to defend its interests, as it should. This is these constant attacks by these other countries, particularly the Baltic states, to treat modern day Russia as if it was the Soviet Union is a level of ignorance and foolishness that I don't have words to describe. And let's look at the effect of the sanctions. As a result of the sanctions, Russia's economic growth last year is 4.1%. Healthy. Yeah, they've got some inflation. And it wasn't just Russia claiming that. World Bank and IMF both had to revise their projections because originally they were saying, Russia's only going to grow 2%. Doubled that. Whereas in Europe, they're doing the exact opposite. The Baltic states, they made a big to-do the other day about cutting. We're no longer going to accept Russian energy. We're cutting it off. Their costs went up 300%. And they're buying electricity from Europe, electricity that's generated by Russian oil that the Europeans are buying to run their jet. It's crazy. All of this is nothing more than twisted political theater. There's no the real substance in it. Nobody thinks through. So yeah, they want to impose sanctions on Russia. Go ahead. Russia is self-sufficient. I've made that point for 3 years now. They don't need anything from the West, which is one of the things they came to discover as a result of the sanctions. Whereas Europe and the United States, they do have needs of some of the rare earth minerals, if nothing else, uranium. They need what Russia has. And so when they impose these sanctions, they are just hurting themselves. Again, I have no explanation for how people who are capable of speaking coherent sentences, who have attended university, they're not showing that they are mentally incompetent. He's not taking his clothes off in the middle of the office and running around outside naked. So he seems to be mentally intact. And yet, to say something that's like this is so objectively stupid and dangerous. Because remember, that's the other caveat that Hegseth put out there. Hey, if you guys decide to go in and provide security, get involved in Ukraine, to put your troops on the ground, you're not doing that as NATO troops. And if you get attacked, you don't come crying to us about Article 5. Oh, they've attacked us. You got to help us. No, he said, we're done. Not our problem. It's your problem. So when you get down to 25,000, you'd be looking at actually 90%, 80% of Britain's actual combat capability, which would be deployed, which is nothing. That number is nothing. That's about the size of the Ukrainian force that went into Kursk in August. And now here we are coming up on 6 months later. They're still there getting killed. But they continue to flood people in, and over 60,000 have been killed and wounded, according to Russian estimates. Starmer he thinks he's going to come to Washington and talk to Trump. I'd be shocked if Trump receives him. I mean, remember, Starmer was the one who sent members of his own political party over to the United States to campaign for Kamala Harris. That's more meddling than anything the Russians are alleged to have done in 2016. And yet it's supposedly okay because they're Brits. Look, I'm of British-Irish descent, okay? So, yeah, it is literally genetically cousins with them. But what the British government and security services have become is an embarrassment. And that gets into what with J.D. Vance's remarks, which have just pushed the Europeans all over the edge. The reality is this. You face a greater risk if you go to Russia, go to Moscow, go to London. I think J.D. Vance was too polite in his remarks about basically the enemy within that Europe represents. The only problem with J.D. Vance's remarks is the U.S. hypocrisy of, condemning Europe for not allowing free speech. At the same time, in the United States, we will attack those who speak out on behalf of the Palestinian people. So there is that hypocrisy. The essence of what Vance was saying was spot on. Europe is an irrelevancy, and they can cobble together all the troops they want. If they send troops into Ukraine, they will die. That's one certainty that we can take from all of this. Now, so I think Trump is going to end U.S. involvement in NATO, but he's not going to do it in an upfront confrontational way. It's going to be it'll die away. But one of the reasons, because many of these NATO countries, most prominently the United Kingdom, were actively involved in spying and developing a covert action against Donald Trump in 2016 to try to prevent him to become president, and then continued to try to sabotage and undermine him. They meddled in the U.S. presidential election, UK especially. I think that's one of the reasons that the United States turned to the Brits last week or a week and a half ago and said, okay, you're in charge of the group now that has to round up all the support for Ukraine. You take on that job, knowing full well that the Brits can't do it and that they'll fall flat on their face. It's just, it's one other message. The Brits are not the friends of the United States, or at least of the Trump crowd. They may like the blue hair, green hair crowd, but that's not Trump. So this individual who, just what a pathetic sight. You get all weep. What they're weeping over is the years of taking money from the United States and getting wealthy. My understanding is the average member of the European Union that is there as a delegate, they made like $250,000 a year. It's a huge amount of money. This is a money train. That's part of the reason I think the United States doesn't want to be around people like that. I can say I have fairly a couple of derogatory expressions in mind that I just probably better not for me to say. But Europe's irrelevant. The United States, on the one, let's talk about practically, economically, militarily. No reason in the world that the United States should be there, being the front line of defense for Europe. This ain't 1946, and even then it was a lie. No, we had to protect Europe from the Soviets. No, it was really probably, I think, more of a plan of Western imperialism and this needless confrontation with the then Soviet Union. But what Russia is today, it's not the Soviet Union. It's not a communist state. And these people that continue to push the lie that Putin and others are intent on reconstituting, quote, the Russian Empire. Yeah, I like it. You remember all those Russian colonies in Africa and Asia and South America? Neither do I, because they didn't exist. It is the height of hypocrisy to listen to anybody from the United States or Europe talk about colonial empire, Russia being an empire, aspiring empire, when it's the United States and Europe that have been consistently going out, occupying the territory of other countries that are far outside the boundaries of their nation. Well, Europe, almost across the board, is in a significant recession. They're economically struggling. They're not prospering. They're not facing low unemployment and not able to find workers because all the factories are up and running. Particularly, you got to worry about the big three, about Germany, France, England, or the United Kingdom. All three are in real trouble. Germany is deindustrializing. Europe is irrelevant, which is the reality. Europe is, as I said, is they are the attendant. Like a professional golfer will have a caddy. That's all Europe is. Europe's a lousy caddy. They're a tag along. They don't bring anything to the table. They bring very little money. So still the Europeans, yeah, we can supply weapons to Ukraine. You buy them from us and you can send them to them. Hey, buy all of our Abrams, or we'll make them for you, the Europeans, and whatever you do with them, hey man, it's your business. They've got a problem in Europe where they've wanted to unite, to have, we're European. So you've got this disconnect because in each country, you've got nationalists in Germany and France and England and Italy and Spain, Portugal, Romania, you just go down the list, Poland, that they value their own nation first and foremost, and they don't want to necessarily have it sacrificed on the altar of Brussels. But that's where it's been. And now they got themselves in a real dilemma. Who, as you correctly note, who speaks for the people of Europe? The folks, Orban and Fico, they've got a completely different perspective from, say, Tusk and Macron and Starmer. So there is no unity, and that lack of unity spills over into NATO as well. What Trump is doing right now and taking on this bureaucracy and money that Congress has appropriated, it's all part of a grift. I really wish people would start we'd get a comprehensive list of the net worth of every member of Congress from when they entered into Congress until now. Elizabeth Warren reportedly has made $10 million during her time as senator. They only get paid $200,000 a year. I don't care how good of an investor you are. You don't make that kind of money. Where's she getting the money? Nancy Pelosi, multi-millionaire. The same for Mitch McConnell. The United States likes to sit on its white throne of moral judgment and tell other countries about how corrupt they are. Look, Ukraine, most corrupt country in Europe. I would argue that one of the most corrupt countries in the world is the United States. We just disguise it better. We dress it up. We pretend. But look at the Clinton Foundation as an example. You look at the protections that went to hide the identities of Epstein's clients, the people, and we like to pretend that it's only overseas, these other countries. And the one thing Trump doesn't like is getting bullied and threatened. So yeah, they may have given him a bunch of money, but he's not going to take their bullying and threatening if they come after him. He's going to do what Trump wants to do and what's in the best interest of Donald Trump. Now, whether that serves the national interest of the United States, a whole nother question. But Trump's not going to be sitting there saying, what does Bibi want me to do today? That's nonsense. Egypt reportedly has been putting together a plan, and they've got the approval, or they're going to get the approval of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. There's 30, 40 nations that are Islamic, ruled by the people who adhere to the Muslim faith. If they show up with that plan to Donald Trump and say, okay, you don't have to move the Palestinians, we'll take care of it. Here's our plan. We got the money. We'll pay for it. I could very easily say, Trump going, oh, hey, good. All right, there's a solution now. Hey, the Arabs are stepping up. They're taking shoulder the burden. And then at that point, it just tell Israel, hey, this is going to happen. And there's not a lot Israel can do about it. So I don't see, what are they going to do to Donald Trump? If you don't do what we want, we're not going to vote for you next time. He ain't running next time. He's not. So the leverage of AIPAC at this point is real limited as far as Trump concerns Donald Trump. Now, if, Katz, the defense minister in Israel, he's just being fat and stupid is not a good look. And he thinks that Israel can go magically destroy Iran's capabilities. Trump is not going to sign off on that. He doesn't want a new war. He wants to be known as the peacemaker. And that's why I say I bet more on his vanity. He loves the attention he gets when he's the great peacemaker. And so that's where I think his instincts are inclined to go. He's not going to, there are those who pundits around that insist that Trump's on the string of Bibi Netanyahu. He's just a puppet of Netanyahu. He's Netanyahu's prison bitch. That Bibi slaps him around. No. Trump is his own force of nature. Now, I'm not arguing that he says the right things, or even sometimes his policies can be completely wrong. But I think too many people underestimate him, and they claim that this guy is stupid. He's not stupid. Okay, he is not a great speaker. The fact that he defeated the entire weight of the deep state in the United States over really an 8-year period to try to destroy him. It started in 2016, and they failed. They threw everything in the book at him. He's not Chauncey Gardner from the movie Being there, who was basically a mentally retarded guy that got to be president of the United States. Donald Trump's not Chauncey Gardner. Israel, despite its false belief, that it is severely weakened Iranian defenses and that will have virtually unfettered access to Iranian nuclear plants or factories working on nuclear technology. The fact of the matter is that their airplanes, missiles will be shot down, so a large number of them. And then Iran will retaliate. It had vowed retaliation for the attacks on October 27th and never did it. And I think part of that was at the behest of Russia. Russia encouraging them to show restraint, to not provide a provocation, if you will, to take the high road. And as a consequence of doing that, they'd get a signed security arrangement with Russia, which happened on January 17th. That all the hostages aren't released, they're going to be held to pay. Okay. Even Israel has backed off of that. So despite Netanyahu going back and repeating it, they've now backed off of that. Hamas is now going to release 3 more hostages. And still the Israelis are violating the ceasefire. But I think someone is advising, and it may be the Russians. They could be helping advise Hamas behind the scenes to let the Israelis hang themselves. You don't give them the rope to hang you. Europe is an underage child as far as the United States is concerned. They bring nothing to the table. They don't control vast swaths, vast resources. They don't have huge sums of money, large numbers of soldiers, military equipment. They're along for the ride, and they've been freeloading. The other dimension to this that's maybe factoring into Trump's thoughts, particularly with the UK, is it was British intelligence that played a major role in helping perpetrate the Russiagate fraud against Trump. It was a British MI6 officer, former Christopher Steele. So I don't think Trump's got he doesn't have the time of day for the Brits. The special relationship with them, screw them. That's probably Trump's attitude. And frankly, I don't blame him. Part of the problem has been anyone that's ever dealt with the Europeans, and I have over the years, going back to my time at State Department 36 years ago. There's an era, you got a lot of very pleasant people, a lot of very smart people, cultured, but there's an arrogance there of they're better than you. You Americans are crude. We're sophisticated. You catch that vibe out of them. And yet they have indulged this woke agenda. Candidly, go into Germany, in Berlin, the sex clubs that have existed there for years, there's a level of moral degeneracy that the Germans have accepted just as normal, that the rest of the world is shocked and appalled at. The Germans have chosen their own path, as have the Brits, as have the French. But I return to emphasize the key point. There's not a majority view. It's broken up. It's balkanized. You got lots of minority views, and that's just whichever minority groups get together to decide to work together on a temporary basis. But there's no consensus about what does it mean to be German. Germany used to consider itself a Christian nation, no longer. Same for France. You've seen the role of the Catholic Church through much of Europe. It was a very powerful force going into the middle of the 20th century. Now it's become significantly less. And that's the irony, because in Russia, the Eastern Orthodox Church is strong and growing stronger and plays a central role in the government. You don't see anything like that in any of the rest of Europe.